Good afternoon. I'm James Vann with Vann Attorneys. We practice law in North Carolina, and welcome to the webinar today. We're going to be talking about drone law or UAS drone law in North Carolina, which also applies to the feds by virtue of the federal regulations. We're going to do a little bit of an update on the drone law, so we're glad that you are with us today. If you have questions, you may submit them one of two ways. You may either submit it on the GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar control panel, or you may send it by email to webinar@vannattorneys.com. So again, if you have a question, we'd love to hear from you. So we're going to be talking about a few updates, and quite frankly, we could do a half a day to a full day seminar on the drone law, and we really obviously are not going to be able to cover that in the webinar today. It's sort of more of a whet your appetite, make sure you understand some issues, and we can dig deeper later. If you need some help, please contact us. And we may wind up having a longer seminar type setting later this fall. But some of the things we're going to be talking about is obviously defining what an unmanned aircraft is, looking at the federal regulations, looking at just thoughts from a commercial purpose, commercial use. What are the safeguards to do? What are some of those issues to think about? We'll look at some of the North Carolina law. As you know, since the federal regulations have come out, I think many of you obviously are already pretty familiar with the drone law, the unmanned aircraft regulations that are coming out. Many of you are monitoring it pretty closely. We're going to talk about how that may parlay with North Carolina law, and I know a lot of states had issued or had passed legislation earlier, before the feds had started coming out with their regulations, having to do with drone law and the usage and how it operates. Some of those laws are going to have to be modified across the country. I've read a lot of articles from other states. North Carolina has not identified how they're going to what they will have to do, if they'll do anything to their laws, but there is a little bit of a conflict, and my guess is, based upon other laws, when you have conflicts, the feds typically win out on that issue. So we'll talk about that, but before we get to that, I want to have a very special thank you to a friend of mine, Michael Fernald. He works in our office. He does our marketing and IT type management, helping us with computers and technology. He also has a company called Technology Media LLC. He does a lot of technology issues for other companies, and some of those which are clients and friends, and we know them, and we all love what he does. He helps us with these webinars, and that's why they go as smooth as they do. So thank you, Michael. He also is licensed now for commercial purposes for unmanned aircraft. So I know he's already started doing some of that for other companies. So he likes this stuff too, and I keep telling him he needs to operate it in the office and fly it around and hover over people's desks, but we haven't done that yet because I think that's going to probably get us sued, but we'll try to stay away from it. So what is an unmanned aircraft? For those of you who may not know the definition, is typically speaking, it's the aircraft system is the aircraft itself with any associated elements, which can include communication links and components that help control the aircraft. And anything else that's associated with the aircraft while it's flying. So that's just typical type of definition for what is an unmanned aircraft. A model aircraft is used or flown for hobby, recreational usage, and it's not for business or commercial purposes. So typically the definitions you'll see now when it talks about a model aircraft, that's how they're defining it. So it would be basically non-business or commercial purposes. Many of you know that the federal regulations have come into place. License certifications have started being issued, and I think I was talking with someone earlier. And at least in Raleigh, around the Raleigh area, they were having about, I think I'm looking at Michael now for an answer. I think they were, how many per week, Michael? Were they running through there? About 30 a week. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't think they've published any stats yet that I've seen, at least, saying how many people are being qualified or registered with certifications, but that certainly it will be coming out soon. Under the federal aviation regulations, Part 101, it talks about the model aircraft and how it should be operated and so forth. And again, the regulations, they put out, the federal regulatory body put out probably, I'm going to say that, I know they did an initial rules, then they did 2 or 3 proposals, and in the typical federal regulatory world, it grew substantially. It's pretty broad, so we're not going to go through that verbatim because y'all would fall asleep, and so would I. But we're going to just sort of hit the highlights. So to fly a model aircraft, you must be operating, obviously, the aircraft, follow the Section 336 of the regulations, operate it within a community-based guidelines having to do with the safety issues, not endanger the national airspace, and then obviously also register as a model aircraft owner. And that also depends on what type of aircraft you will be operating and flying. Under the Aviation Regulations 107, that deals with small unmanned aircraft, and it regards the airman certification, the registration of it, operation of the small unmanned aircraft system. And the small unmanned aircraft is defined as unmanned aircraft weighing less than 55 pounds. So that's how they define it. That's as of takeoff. And we were talking earlier today about how I know some manufacturers are obviously trying to get the weight limit down or get the weight down in their aircraft, and that will continue to happen probably as technology improves, and certainly the battery weight is a big issue. As that all improves, the weight will be substantially different. So, also they define visual observer as someone designated by the remote pilot to assist in the pilot so that they can see and avoid other aircraft objects that are either in the air or on the ground. And interesting enough, to be certified, you have to, before you can fly every day or whenever you're going to fly, you have to check for any restrictions. And I was talking with Michael about this the other day. We had, I think, either presidential candidate or the vice president was in town, and basically all around Raleigh was restricted that day. So, had you, from a commercial purpose, had you planned to do a shoot on something, that would have changed your plans had you been in that area. So, there's, again, something, obviously to think about and plan for. And hopefully between now and November, we won't have as many disruptions, but early November, you never know. So you can check that every day if you're doing it for commercial purposes. Small unmanned aircraft, under 107, there's a substantial portion for any falsification, reproduction, or alteration of records. They obviously want to keep really good records, and part of what we're doing is we're helping both drone operators and also businesses that are hiring that type of service. From the drone operation standpoint, and if it's a company that operates it, you really want to make sure that you're not falsifying documents. Down the road that will happen. There'll be some cover-up for something, but it really is not something you want to get involved in because it's going to impact license issues, certification issues, and possibly other criminal charges down the road. Also, it provides for inspection of, testing, and demonstration for the compliance to the administrator for the UAS. They can request that. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think, quite frankly, that's going to happen anytime soon. But I think probably if there are complaints or if there's an issue that stems up somewhere, that's probably where that request would come from the administration. Also, it talks about accident reporting, when you need to report, how you need to report, operating rules, registration, and then it's a whole host of other provisions. So that sort of gives you a little bit of an example of 107. Did a little research to give you an idea. I know a lot of people have been getting exemptions or asking for exemptions. As of August 26th, it was up around 5,500 petitions granted. And I know a lot of people did not think that the they would grant that many exemptions, but they obviously are trying to, I guess, push that as much as they can so to get people experience, but also start using this within the confines of the regulations. We're going to go over just a little bit of, for commercial purposes, just to think, a few things to think about contracts that are needed. If you're the drone operator or the owner of the drone, you really should have a contract with your customer, that is, whoever you're doing this for from a commercial purpose. That protects you, but certainly protects them as well. More than likely, again, I wouldn't feel comfortable giving legal advice. This is just, in general, a very general basis. If you're operating a drone and you are hiring out for commercial purposes, you really probably should be incorporated and not doing that in your individual name. That's from a liability standpoint. If something were to happen, you don't want to subject yourself to the potential liability if you're the operator owner. You would want there to be a company, an LLC, there to hopefully protect you, protect your personal assets. If you are the customer, if you're the end user, or excuse me, the end customer, and you're hiring, someone to maybe help you with some aspect of, they're going to be using a drone to do some work for you, you certainly want a contract as well. And again, most of those issues are going to be the same thing. What's the liability? What's the insurance? Who owns the data, depending upon what kind of information you're gathering. Again, from a liability standpoint, obviously both sides, either the operator, owner, or the customer, you want to make sure everybody knows who has what liability and for what, how that operates, and from a standpoint of if there's an accident, if there's physical damage to maybe real property or even personal property, or just to damage to someone if it involves a person. Hopefully that won't happen, but you want to protect yourself. What about other forms of insurance? I know that is a growing business, which is normal as this industry matures. The insurance portion of it has really started maturing as well. And one thing I would highly encourage you to do is talk to companies who have already written policies, who are comfortable in that marketplace, and it's not a brand new area for them. Also, the indemnification, that's just, again, who's pushing the envelope back and forth, who's going to pay for some, if there is damage. The other issue that we want to encourage you to think about is the data privacy. If in that process for the commercial purpose, the drone operator or owner is collecting data, who owns the data? Does the drone operator own it and they're then just providing that information, or does the customer own it? That's obviously, data and the ownership of the information with just technology in general is pretty big dollar for most contracts. So think about that. Who owns the data? How can you use it? So forth. Also, certainly in North Carolina, there are privacy issues with drone operation, certainly from a video or a picture standpoint. You're going to be really careful about that to make sure that if you're, say, for example, a company hiring a drone operator to take photos or video for you, that they're also complying with the law, so that if you upload, so they're doing a video, you upload it to your website or however you're going to use it, and all of a sudden you realize that the drone operator violated the law in North Carolina by taking photos of people without their permission. Who's going to be liable for that? Is it the drone operator or owner, or is it the customer? So you got to think through that. And again, it's just a risk management standpoint. Again, for both sides of that equation, we need to think through that a little bit. So again, those are just some things for you to think about. We're going to do a little brief review of the North Carolina law just to catch you up to speed with it. There has not been any changes thus far since they passed this. When the legislature comes back in January, I would not be surprised if there's not a tweak to it. And we'll also talk about the licensing issue on the end of this portion with North Carolina. But In North Carolina, no person, entity, or state agency will be able to use aircraft to do any of the, if you're doing surveillance for a person or dwelling that is a house or home, residence occupied without that person's consent. So you can't hover outside someone's house and take video of them without their consent or pictures. Private real property without the owner's consent, not supposed to go over it, or the lessee either. Photograph an individual without their consent for purpose of publication. I've heard a lot of people talk to me. They come up and talk to us because they know we're doing this, and they've talked about how many drones are at the beach now in the summertime, just flying up and down the beach. I gotta think there's some of those that are doing photography, and we, for the most part, they're not getting any authorization or consent. So haven't seen that pop up from a legal perspective yet, but it certainly, I'm sure it will before long. There are exceptions, and that's if it's news gathering, newsworthy events, events or places where the general public is invited. And I think I said this maybe in a previous webinar we did, but last Christmas parade in Raleigh, we were there with our family having fun watching it. Somebody was operating a drone above the parade. Looked like they were filming the parade itself. And 2 years ago, I'd have said if that happened, most people would say, oh, that's pretty cool. That year, this past year when that happened, everybody was very concerned about that drone being above them. I mean, it was pretty good height up, but the drone being above them, above their heads, and whether or not they were taking photos of them or video. And I just sort of was watching the people because I wanted to see what their impact, what they were thinking. And it wasn't as, the curiosity factor had sort of passed a little bit, and they weren't real happy about that. They were trying to figure out who was operating it. Eventually, from a battery standpoint, it came, they had to bring it down. But just think through that a little bit. Again, in North Carolina, some general prohibitions. Any person subject to unwarranted surveillance or photo is, if taken, that's a violation. They'll have a right to sue against the person, entity, or state. And again, a question is, say, for example, you're a company, you hire someone to do photo taking or video, and whoever's doing that violates the law by doing it. So does a person that's been violated get to sue the customer, or do they get to sue the operator? So it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure that's going to happen before long. It's the purpose of publishing, or if the purpose of it's publishing or disseminating the video, the damages is $5,000 for each photograph or video that's published or disseminated, plus costs and attorney's fees. I'm gonna tell you, that's a huge number. It will be really interesting to see how that is interpreted in the court system. But again, I want you to know about it, so hopefully that won't be an issue for you. There's also, in North Carolina, criminal charges that are applicable if you possess or use unmanned aircraft with a weapon. Of course, that makes sense. If you interfere or have disruption of a manned aircraft with unmanned aircraft used for fishing or hunting, that's a misdemeanor. If you're trying to publish for any purposes pictures that are taken with infrared or other similar technology that shows the individual's materials or activities inside a structure without their consent, again, misdemeanor. So, just think through that a little bit. We know some private detectives that do a lot of, we don't do family law, thankfully, but I want to ask them. I know they would not use that because that would be against the law, but I want to ask them, what they're going to be doing. I mean, certainly they have the ability to monitor and do surveillance without aircraft, but it'll be interesting to see if that ever comes into being with that industry. For commercial and private unmanned aircraft using infrared type equipment or thermal equipment, it's got to be for the purpose of scientific research, mapping, evaluating the Earth surface, and so forth. It's not supposed to be for any other purposes. Also, any person who willfully damages, disrupts, or the operation of or otherwise interferes with a manned aircraft, with an unmanned aircraft, that's a Class H felony. Again, certainly that's going to probably happen accidentally down the road. Hopefully it would not be intentional. So again, the statute says willfully damages or disrupts. The unintentional, oops, I didn't mean to do that, mistake, my part, operator error, would be a defense to that probably. Or if you're harassing someone, a person that's taking wildlife resources lawfully, that is hunters or fishermen, and you're flying the aircraft to try to scare away the animals, can't do that. Can't do it intentionally. So that's, an interesting piece of the law. And as we said earlier, the North Carolina law was put in before the federal regulations. They knew the federal regs were going to be coming, but they've got in here that they're rules developed by the Division of Aviation, the North Carolina DOT, and they've got, it's going to be knowledge base and skills tests for operating, to be for commercial purposes, and they've got to have a license. So the question is going to be is whether or not that's going to change. I don't know, haven't heard. I need to inquire with them and to see if they expect that that's going to be something different. So hopefully some background on UAS, the federal regulations. The federal regulations, quite frankly, are really deep. I mean, it's pretty deep in as far as the interpretation of operation of the unmanned aircraft. If y'all have questions, please feel free to call us or contact us. We'd be glad to help you with that. We'll do some more of this type of either do webinars or maybe do a seminar soon to get it a little bit more in depth. But I would imagine many of y'all have probably applied for certification, and if you hadn't, you probably will be before long. We actually had a client who the company bought a drone to use in their business. They have a large piece of property that they have equipment on. So I'm not exactly sure how they're going to use it yet, but they're using it. Initially, they were going to use it for inventory control, being able to fly over and make sure things were in good condition on the property. I'm sure the usage of this is going to continue to grow. And I know many of y'all have seen the news where they're talking about packages being shipped and so forth. Don't know really how quick that'll happen. So we got a question here. It says, what about family members who own drones who do work for free? Does that count? Well, it depends on what you're doing with that. Typically, it's said for business commercial purposes. This question has to do with where the son is shooting the footage for the father's business. That's a great question. The law really addresses commercial purposes in the sense of, I think they're saying you're being hired to do that. If you are shooting video or using a drone and not charging for it, then that may not be, if you're doing it from a hobby standpoint, I don't think it's a violation. You probably don't have to be certified, would be my initial gut feel. I know a lot of companies at least in North Carolina, and I know across the country, that have operated drones, unmanned aircraft, and they've done it for hire long before the regulations ever came in. So, that's not to say it's approved by any means, but that's a great question. I don't think if it's no compensation and there's no economic benefit for it, then it's probably not a violation, would be my guess, if you look at the statute in a strict manner. But that's a great question. If y'all have other questions, please let us know. We'd be glad to help you. And we would love for you to connect with us online. You can do it by Twitter, LinkedIn, so forth. Comment on our blogs or sign up for our newsletters. We don't sell your information. We'd be glad to be honored to be able to be an information provider for you. So again, thank you so much for connecting with us today, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.